and welcome to episode 2 of the HONESTea. I am so grateful as always to you for joining us. If you haven't seen episode 0 or episode 1, I would love it if you go along and have a look at those if you enjoy this episode. And what I want to talk about today is a subject very close to my heart. It's all about love and it's all about self-love. And it's so interesting to me because, and this is what actually I used to think as well. A lot of people think that self-love is like a manicure or, having a hot bath or, taking your dog for a walk. And all of those things are super cool. And I am not denying that you should, go out and do all of those things. But I would like to go a little bit deeper and give you the HONESTea on what self-love really, really means and what it is. And I think it's just such an important subject for all of us, And I think a lot of times also we consider that it's just for females, that females, need to love themselves more. And yes, I mean, it's been, not going to deny it, it's been a man's world, right, for a very long time, and women are rediscovering themselves and rediscovering who they are, and I absolutely love that. But I do think that we have a lot of men, and and I'm not being gender biased here either. So it applies to all genders. And often when I talk about male and female, I'm talking more about the feminine and the masculine anyway. So I'm not talking about, your physical body. So what I'm trying to say is it's not just a female thing. Self-love is for everybody, and we need to lean into it and accept and love ourselves a hell of a lot more than we do. And so what really is self-love? Self-love is loving yourself so deeply that you accept yourself as you are and that you learn to heal your wounds, to bring to consciousness what your wounds are, and then to heal those wounds when you can, to accept your wounds for what they are, to allow them to be the gift that they can be, and being kinder and more loving to yourself, like in your soul, being loving to yourself, being kind to yourself, advocating for yourself, not sacrificing for others. And this is the other part, right? Because there are so many people we've been taught. I know I was taught really young, and we're conditioned to believe that self-sacrifice is, the gateway to heaven. Like, people who are self-sacrificial are put up on pedestals. And so we genuinely believe that if you sacrifice for your life, then, in the next life it's going to be amazing. Not in this one, but in the next one, right? And what I truly believe is it doesn't have to be that way. We actually get to love ourselves and be loved in this lifetime. We can create our own heaven here on earth in this lifetime. And it starts with loving ourselves, really deeply loving ourselves and honoring ourselves and valuing ourselves. And that's what this is about. It's about how do we love ourselves more. In fact, a lot of this podcast, if you haven't seen it, is around honoring who you are as a person, who your soul is, what your spirit lives for, what makes you feel free and what makes you feel good. And for me, it's helping others with my voice. That's what I recognize is what I actually am really freaking good at. And I really love doing it, and I love to share what I know. And I really hope that in me living my truth, that it'll help you to live yours. And I want to help you to discover what yours is. So when we talk about self-love, we've spent so much of our lives being told that we are to sacrifice for others. And listen, I absolutely 100% believe that we are here to each be in service of one another, right? Absolutely believe that. In fact, that's the reason why I do what I do, is to fill my soul. Yeah, absolutely, to fill my cup so that it is in overflow, so that it overflows into everyone else's cup and to be in service of others. But when it becomes sacrifice, as in we are sacrificing who we are to be a version of ourselves that somebody else needs from us, that is where it all falls apart. So as within, as without, the world is a reflection of who you are. If on the inside you are self-sacrificing, you are sacrificing who you are, and if you've seen my previous podcast, if you're sacrificing your song, your melody, your vibration for somebody else, then you are not going to be able to, first of all, you're not going to be very fucking happy. And secondly, you're not going to be able to resonate with, to bring in the beauty of your life and the joy of your life and all the great things that you deserve. And when you take on other people's belief systems and you start to believe that they're true for you, when you have, for example, a partner who tells you that you're too loud, and listen, I want to premise this by saying I love everyone that's ever been in my life. Absolutely everyone. And I truly believe every single trauma is a gift. Every single person who's been in my life has been a gift. And I understand that they had their own stuff, right? And they were showing up in their conditioning and in their pain and in their wounds. And so this is absolutely not about judgment, because I don't judge others and I don't judge myself anymore, right? And there's a whole fucking lot I could judge about myself, to be honest, and about the people that I've had in my life. But I've been in, in relationships where I've been told that I was just too loud. We would get home from a party. So I was in a domestic violence relationship many years ago, and we would get home from being out with friends at a party or whatever, and he would be like, "Oh, you're just too fucking loud. You think you're so fucking hilarious, don't you? You're too fucking loud." Everybody was so embarrassed by you. I was embarrassed by you. I could hear you from across the way. And it was just so fucking embarrassing. Your laugh is too loud. All of this kind of thing. And the funny thing is, I'd actually kind of always, but he was a manifestation of what I already believed myself to be, right? So my mother, who had adopted me, also thought I was too loud. I was too much, and that's because she was so wounded, and I know that she was always put in a box, and so that's what she believed, and she struggled with me. We struggled with each other, to be fair, because my nervous system response is fight, and so that can be a lot for a lot of people. When I would always fight for my right, rather than, I'm not exactly the beguiling, I'm not small in stature or in any way, shape or form. So, I was never going to blend into the background much. And also I was a bit of a nerd and like all the things anyway. Doesn't matter. I've just always been a little bit different from other people. And I really struggled with that for a long time. But anyway, she said it, my teachers said it, everybody said it. And then when I got in this, relationship, he said it and I believed it. And so I started to minimize myself. I started to sacrifice who I was on the inside. I stopped laughing so loudly at parties. I stopped being who I was, And the funny thing is, the really funny thing is that, he would tell me, this kind of conditioning that happens in domestic violence relationship. For me, how it played out was that he told me every day, bit by bit, how I was less than in one way, shape, or form. And then ultimately, by the time he was hitting me, it was sort of like meh, you know, because I was so the opposite of the version of myself that I needed to be. I was so disingenuous to myself, to my soul. I was so not who I believed I could be. And I had sacrificed myself to be the version of what he needed for me. And people, the really funny thing is, people would see this fight response sometimes when we're out, right? And they would just believe that I was this, I was always in charge. And I'm a bit of a jokester, so I would always say, oh, well, I wear the pants and, da da da. And people would believe it. But like, honestly, we were going home and he was beating me up for being too loud or whatever it was, or not having the kids asleep before he got home or whatever, And the thing is that I was sacrificing who I was as a person in so many ways. And what I want you to understand is that's not the only kind of self-sacrifice. There is that's a major, right? Where I was allowing myself to really get to a point where I believed so much that, I could change and he would change and that we could be together and we would have this family. I wanted that so much. I wanted it for my boys and I wanted it for me and I wanted it for him, we wanted it. I really thought that we could make it work, I sacrificed myself to the point of where, he was physically harming me because I so believe that that's what you did in a relationship, that you sacrifice who you are. And in fact, I saw so many examples of that. And my own beautiful, my mother who adopted me, as I got older, I saw so much of her own self-sacrifice. Only I didn't understand it then, right? And the thing is that I think there are so many people that are sacrificing who they are. Maybe not to that extent where I was, right? But where we are sacrificing who we are in our jobs, for our families, for our obviously our significant others, for our even for our children. We're becoming a version of ourselves that is disingenuous to who we are. We always, we take on other people's pain. We take on other people's grief. We don't, we abandon ourselves for the sake of other people. And what I want to say is it's okay to set a boundary. Setting boundaries is actually such a wonderful, beautiful, powerful place to be. And, it took me a long time to even understand that I needed to set boundaries, even with my own siblings. I set boundaries because I realized that first of all, I was begging them to accept me as I was, and they just weren't able to. Not because they're bad people, not because I don't know why, but because they had their own conditioning and they had their own beliefs, and they still do, and for me, I couldn't keep turning up and begging them to love me and begging them to accept who I was just as I was. And the older I got, the more I didn't want to sacrifice myself anymore. When I got out of my domestic violence relationship, and this was decades ago now, so I bet people who are watching this are like, there's no way. But yes, actually it was true. But when I was in that relationship, I had sacrificed myself so much that when I got out of it, I just could not bear. I couldn't bear it. And my family really struggled with that version of me because I just couldn't be, quiet myself anymore. I didn't want to be told that I was too much or not enough anymore. But I was still carrying so many of those wounds around. And what I want to say is you can set boundaries, beautiful, powerful boundaries, so that you don't have to show up as a different version of yourself when you're with somebody. Now, sometimes you're going to show up and they're going to be like, whoa, loving this version of you, or they're just going to accept it, and that's cool too. But sometimes they're going to show up and they're not going to be cool with it. And then that's when you can just set a boundary and just quietly leave. You don't have to be like, I'm setting a boundary, just letting you know. You can just leave, just quietly leave, Quietly quitting is actually a thing. And it doesn't have to be a big song and dance. Maybe sometimes it will need to be a conversation. And the thing about it is, it doesn't actually mean, Tupac says it best. He says, it's not that I don't want you to eat. I just don't want you to eat at my table, right? So I wish prosperity and love and joy and peace and all the great things on all the people that I've set a boundary with. I just don't want them to be in my space right now because it is hurting me, and it's harming who I am, and it's taking away my longevity, and it's taking away my power. Hey, what a crack up this is, right? Just a segue, because this is cracking me up. If you're on Spotify, you won't see this, but I just realized this bloody I have this ring light, and it was like this whole time I think it's been sitting in the picture, and that's because I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. The first time I ran a live, which was like a few years ago, right, when I had my other business, and my daughter came in, and those ring lights, I had it behind me like a halo, and she came in the room. She was like, "Oh my God, Mom," and because I actually have no idea what I'm doing. So anyway, if you're not seeing it, this just proves how honesty this is, because I actually have no idea what I'm doing right now. But going back to our topic, set a boundary, and that's okay. Be willing to have the conversation if you need to, but if you don't need to, you can just quietly remove yourself. And it doesn't mean that you're judging them. It's just that you get to set those beautiful boundaries for yourself. And I want you to understand, it's something I touched on last week, is, we consider our ego to be the superior, and we will be really judgy about people who we think are superior. But it's also the inferior. So it's the point of self-sacrifice where we make ourselves inferior to other people. So we're not honoring ourselves. And it is possible to do both, right? It's possible to honor yourself and your belief and your soul and what you believe in, and to be in a relationship. Now, it's one of the most difficult things because people are turning up as teachers all the time. They are reflective of wounds that we need to heal. And so, there's a lot of times, oh my God, like my husband and I now, we are light years away from where we used to be when we first met. And that's because, and man, we used to turn up in our wounds and in our pain bodies all the time, and when we started to understand that we were a reflection of each other and what we needed to heal, and when we could really recognize all of that, it's changed things for us. That doesn't mean we don't show up for each other in that way sometimes, but man, if you can find that magic in your relationship, it is so amazing. And all your relationships, where you can just accept who you are for one another, accept that you're teaching one another and that you're growing with one another, and set boundaries with people that are not resonating with your soul, that don't make you feel good. And maybe that will change, maybe down the line that person will come back into your life, and that's an amazing thing too. But I just want you to know that self-love is not just getting your hair done, getting your, I don't know, whatever floats your boat. Maybe you love to get massages. Maybe you like a salt bath. I don't know, whatever it is, a float tank, whatever. It's more than that. It's loving yourself so deeply, accepting yourself for who you are, discovering more of yourself. And what does, one of the things that I work on really very early on is, what do I love? When I ask most people, I'll say, what is it that you want? They don't even know because they've never discovered or thought about, what do I want? Not what do I want because my husband wants this for me? What do I want because my kids need me to be this? What do I want because my employer expects this of me? What do I want? And it's bigger than, we always, most of us, it's going to be around our physical health, our mental health, and then, the money and the prosperity and all of that. But what do I want in my soul? What fills me with joy? What makes me happy? What are the things that light me up inside? And it's different for everyone. We don't all love the same things. And with my husband, he's a bit of an introvert. I'm a bit of an extrovert. So, especially early on in our relationship, he would go out for me, I would stay home for him. It was just how, because my soul didn't love staying home all the time and being a weirdo, being a recluse. He didn't like going out a lot. And so, it took us a while to find our rhythm. So now that is a different thing. That is not self-sacrifice. When you acknowledge that I'm going to do this for somebody. Now, you don't have to say to them, I'm just letting you know I'm sacrificing myself to go out for you. When you're actually just being of service, that's a different thing. When you're choosing it to be of service to somebody else because you love them deeply and you want to do something that maybe is not your favorite thing to do, but you're going to go and do it. Now, that's service. That's not sacrifice. And there's a very, there's a difference. So the place to start self-love, really start loving yourself, is to start with, what do I love? What do I love with all of my soul? What are the things that fill me with joy? What are the things that make me happy? What are the, and if you're not sure, it's such a beautiful self-discovery. And one of the things that works really well is if you go back to your childhood, start to think of the things that you found really fun when you were young, What are those things? Honor those things about yourself. Stop sacrificing for other people. And stop abandoning who you are. Set boundaries. You are an aspect of the divine, of the creator, of God. And so understanding who you are, understanding your own song, your own melody, your own vibe, and singing in harmony, when we all get in our own vibration and we're able to sing in harmony, be in harmony with other people, when you truly live as you are, who you are, loving who you are, then all of that joy and peace and harmony overflows into everybody else in your life. And that's how you are really helping them to be more of who they are. And that's the most wonderful thing, right? Then we all get to sing in harmony with one another and we're not clashing so much, right? I hope that you found this really helpful. I hope that you go out and, heal deeply, lead boldly, live fully. That's my ultimate prayer for you. My intention is that everyone who listens to this podcast will be able to be more of themselves, be more of their own melody, be more of who they are. Fill your own cup so that you can overflow into others and be in a place of service. So I'm going to leave you with that. I appreciate you more than you'll ever know, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Biggest loves. Mwah.